Sometimes being a babysitter really isn't worth the 20 quid you get from your weird neighbour. Personally, I think Sam Gamgee had the worst babysitting gig of all time, but these unfortunate souls come pretty damn close. I'm Tilly from What Culture, and these are 10 babysitter horror movies you probably haven't seen. 10. Better watch out. If you've ever wondered what Home Alone would look like if it were a horror film, then look no further than underappreciated cult gem Better Watch Out. A horror comedy with a festive twist, this film comes to us courtesy of director Chris Peckover. Reworking the script along with original writer Zach Kahn, Peckover turned what was essentially a gruesome gorefest into a darkly comedic, but nevertheless violent, genre outing. The plot follows Zach, a deviously intelligent 12-year-old who has a crush on his babysitter Ashley. However, when he discovers that her family plan to move away after Christmas, he, alongside his best friend Garrett, hatch a scheme to emotionally manipulate her so that she'll fall in love with him and stay. Despite his quote-unquote best laid plans though, it doesn't take long for events to go awry, and from this point on the plot descends into chaos as insanity and hilarity ensue. Carried entirely by a phenomenal young cast, Better Watch Out is one of those rare films that goes in a completely different direction than it initially leads you to expect. It's best not to know anything more about the details before watching this one. 9. Babysitter Wanted. Needing cash for college, Angie applies for a babysitting gig at a rural farmhouse to look after the adorably strange Sam. However, if Angie knew anything about horror films, she would have known that creepy kids in farmhouses are never a good combination and would have handed her resignation immediately and fled for the hills. Unfortunately for her, she fails to notice these red flags and her first night on the job becomes a nightmare experience. Co-directed by first-time filmmakers Jonas Barnes and Michael Manasseri with a script penned by Barnes, Babysitter Wanted failed to make a big impression upon its arrival in 2008, but it's since earned a soft spot in the hearts of horror fans. It's as schlocky as you'd expect from a low-budget horror film from this time, but that's all part of its charm. As the night begins, Angie begins receiving disturbing phone calls from a mysterious stranger who attempts to break into the home. However, resourceful and fast-thinking, Angie does what she can to protect herself and Sam from the assailant. But everything isn't as it seems. An unexpected twist shifts events into a direction of the supernatural variety to a chilling effect, and divulging more would ruin the surprise. Number 8. Barkshire County. Also known as Tormented, this Canadian indie horror follows teenager Kylie who, after being bullied by her classmates at a Halloween party, is all but forced to accept a babysitting job at a lavish country mansion later that night. Unbeknownst to Kylie though, her night is only gonna get worse. Not long after being acquainted with the youngsters, the unfortunate babysitter finds herself relentlessly pursued by a group of intruders wearing pig masks hell-bent on driving an axe through her skull. The night of babysitting evolves into a tense game of hide and seek, with Kylie barely managing to stay one step ahead of her assailants as she tries to save herself and the kids. Helmed and funded by Canadian filmmaker Audrey Cummings in her first feature project, Barkshire County is your quintessential home invasion horror. Though the plot is driven by solid central performances, Barkshire County is admittedly a little rough around the edges and has subsequently been met with polarising reviews from those who've had the chance to see it. 7. Emily. In this subgenre, it's the babysitter who's usually the one in danger. But Michael Fellin's Emily, the only feature film by the filmmaker, demonstrated that sometimes it's the babysitter we should be afraid of. A menacing home invasion horror that matches Michael Haneke's funny games on the unsettling factor, the flick sees Emily pose as Anna, a family stand-in babysitter after kidnapping her in the opening scene. Though she seems trustworthy when she appears on the doorstep, her guise is discarded the moment the parents leave. Disabling the internet and taking the laces from the children's shoes, Emily's childcare methods rapidly descend to frightening levels of emotional and physical abuse. Alongside giving the 3 youngsters in her care a gun to play with, she forces them to watch their parents' sex tape and tells them a bedtime story that would keep adults awake at night. Though it isn't particularly excessive in violence, Emily nevertheless creates an uncompromisingly uncomfortable viewing experience by grounding each scene in a pervasive sense of realism that borders on oppressive. 6. The Night Sitter. Just when you think that the babysitter horror genre had nothing new to offer, along came The Night Sitter, a colourful, blood-splattered and all-round delightful horror experience. Premiering on the festival circuit in 2018, it follows con artist Amber posing as a babysitter to rob the home of an occult fanatic. Though the operation goes smoothly at first, the night descends into a neon-drenched nightmare when one of the kids inadvertently uses one of their father's artifacts to summon a trio of witches known as the Three Mothers. With the witches intent on sacrificing the children and possessing the burglars, both sides must join forces to find a way to survive the night as they're picked off one by one. From its cinematography, comprised of bold and dazzling colours, to a pulpy synth score reminiscent of Goblin Has a Weird Orgy with John Carpenter, The Night Sitter is a film that pays homage to Argento's Suspiria, the Three Witches being another nod to the horror classic. A joyous and phantasmagoric treat, The Night Sitter is a genre love letter that horror fans will undoubtedly appreciate. 5. The Nanny. A major part of horror history, Hammer Film Productions is home to countless movie classics, with Dracula, Prince of Darkness and The Devil Rides Out being just some highlights. However, one Hammer outing that's likely passing you by is a 1965 psychological thriller called The Nanny. Based on the novel of the same name by Marion Modell under the pseudonym Evelyn Piper and directed by Seth Holt, this genre classic stars the immovable two-time Oscar-winning extraordinaire Bette Davis as the titular nanny. After returning from a children's home, becoming emotionally disturbed after drowning his younger sister in the bath, Joey harbours a deep suspicion and hatred towards his nanny. Rude, volatile and aggressive, Joey suspects that the family's long-term carer is trying to kill him, while Nanny insists she's only looking out for the family's best interests. However, the reality behind the young girl's death is more sinister than first believed. When the truth is discovered, the film transforms into more of a tragedy than horror, but thanks to another staggering performance from Davis, The Nanny never loses an ounce of its intrigue or momentum. Number 4. Madre. Making its premiere at SXSW, you have no idea how many times it took me to say that, before being picked up by Netflix, Chilean-produced Spanish-language horror Madre is the brainchild of writer-director Aaron Burns. The plot revolves around Diana, who is 4 months pregnant and struggling to cope with caring for her severely autistic son, Martin. That is, until she meets Luz at a chance encounter where she's miraculously able to calm Martin down. She's hired on the spot and Diana's troubles look to be over. Sadly, they're only just beginning. Though Martin's behaviour improves, Diana suspects Luz is up to no good. As strange things begin happening around her home, her suspicions may have been confirmed. Although the flick's somewhat contrived plot failed to impress critics on the festival circuit, Madre is nevertheless a strong genre entry. On one hand, it's a social commentary on racial prejudice. Luz is Filipino and speaks to Martin in her native language, while on the other, it works as a bombastic B-movie. While you might be able to see the reveal coming from a mile away, you'll certainly have a fun time getting there. Number 3. In a Dark Place. Released in 2006, this relatively low-budget horror sees Anna fired from her position as an art teacher to get a job looking after 2 orphaned children, Miles and Flora, at an extravagant country house. In keeping with the source material, Anna discovers the house has a morbid history, with the children finding their last nanny in the nearby lake. Though this version of the gothic ghost story lacks in the sophistication or chills we've seen in The Others and Bly Manor, it more than makes up for in its schlock factor. Number 2. The House of the Devil. Written, directed and edited by the Innkeeper's Ty West, The House of the Devil is easily the most intense inclusion on this list. Shot in grainy 16mm and oozing with period detail, the film is a flawless homage to the low-budget slashers of the 1980s insofar as anyone could believe it was made 40 years ago. Set against the backdrop of the satanic panic that swept the 80s, the plot sees college student Samantha apply for a babysitting job so she can afford to move into her own place. When she arrives at the opulent home though, the owners inform her they don't have a child. Instead, Samantha will be looking after an elderly relative. In typical horror fashion, something far more insidious is afoot in the house, and Samantha is about to witness what this is firsthand. Lucky her! Deliberately set at a slow pace, West takes his time establishing the film's tone. And while nothing really happens for a large chunk of the runtime, the horror comes into full swing when Samantha finds herself tied to a pentagram, all of which results in a chilling climax you really won't soon forget. And number 1. The Mortuary Collection. The Babysitter Murders. A collection of chilling short films by writer-director Ryan Spindell, The Mortuary Collection takes viewers to the fantastically pulpy town of Raven's End, and its decrepit mortuary where Sam inquires about a job there. It's here she meets the booming-voiced mortician Montgomery Dark, who, aside from being brilliantly named, just delivered a funeral for a small child, and he guides her to the library where he keeps a catalogue of each corpse he's looked after. While each of the shorts plots included is as ghastly as the last, the segment of interest here is the Babysitter Murders, a sly homage to Carpenter's original title for Halloween. The final entry in this awesome anthology, this segment chronicles Sam's own terrifying ordeal as a babysitter. While looking after a young boy, Sam encounters an injured man in the house. Moments later, she discovers that the intruder is the escaped asylum patient being reported on the news. The pair struggle in a bloody encounter, and it looks like Sam has the upper hand, smashing the intruder's skull with the television. But the story isn't over yet. In a surprise twist, which we won't spoil here, the film dramatically subverts our expectations to chilling effect. Something far more devious is prowling around here. While it's drastically shorter than the rest of the Babysitter films here, it packs just as much of a punch, and ties directly into the anthology's larger, overarching story.